Okay, so have you ever like completely blanked on someone's name? Like you're about to introduce them and your brain just poof goes blank.
It happens to the best of us. That moment of panic is universal no matter what language you speak.
Right. And then you're stuck with this awkward smile plastered on your face, stammering like,
But that's what we're diving into today. How to handle those awkward moments, especially in English.
Exactly. We're taking a deep dive into this English learning podcast I came across, and they had some really good stuff about navigating those cringeworthy encounters.
It's so important, right? Because those little moments can really throw you off your game.
Totally. Like one phrase they mentioned that really stuck with me was, in a bit of a hurry. It just sounds so much smoother than saying, I'm busy.
Oh, absolutely. In a bit of a hurry, it's just got that softer touch, It's like you're acknowledging the other person but still setting a boundary.
Exactly. It's
Okay.
like, hey, I wish I could chat, but... Okay, and here's another one. How about slipped my mind? I mean, it's such a visual phrase, right?
I love that one. Because it's like you're not just saying you forgot, you're painting this picture of the thought, like actually disappearing.
Right. And it adds a little humor to it, which can be a lifesaver in those situations.
Humor is key. It lightens the mood and makes you more relatable.
Speaking of relatable, this podcast had a hilarious example of a guy named Nick who bumps into this woman, Anna. And of course, he can't remember her name.
At a conference on foreign investment, no less. Talk about awkward.
Right. And he's like, this is so embarrassing, but your name has just slipped my mind. And you can just hear it in his voice, that feeling of, oh no, I messed up.
It shows that fluency isn't just about knowing the right words. It's also about those subtle social cues.
And you know what I loved? Anna just rolls with it. Doesn't miss a beat, just calmly says, it's Anna Faris. Like it's no big deal.
Exactly. Grace under pressure. It's a good reminder that we can all take a breath and not make a mountain out of a molehill.
It's so true. Okay, so we've got, in a bit of a hurry, slipped my mind. But what about when you're in the hot seat and your mind goes blank? Any tips for actually using these phrases in real life?
Well, practice makes perfect, right? Even if it's just mentally rehearsing how you'd handle those situations.
Right, like a conversational fire drill.
Exactly. The more you practice, the more natural it'll become. Oh, and another thing. Remember those subtle differences between contact details and contact information?
Oh yeah, that can be tricky.
Contact details is usually more specific, like what you'd find on a business card, phone number, email address.
Right, like, for your contact details, please provide.
Exactly. While contact information can be broader, like a website or a social media handle.
Okay, so it's all about choosing the right phrase for the situation.
Yeah.
And then there was that great one for when you want to admit a weakness without sounding totally clueless.
You're thinking of terrible with.
Yes, terrible with names,
Huh.
terrible with directions.
Terrible with technology. We've all been there.
Right, and it's like a self-deprecating way to acknowledge it, which can actually make you more relatable.
Exactly. Because, let's be honest, nobody's perfect. And admitting that can make people feel more comfortable around you.
I love that. Okay, so before we move on to the next part of the episode, sometimes it's the simplest phrases that are the most useful, like around here, around there.
Oh, absolutely. Those are like the bread and butter of everyday conversations.
Right. Like, excuse me, is there a post office around here? Or I think I saw it around there somewhere.
See, those little phrases, they just make your English sound so much more natural.
It's like they add that extra layer of, I don't know, authenticity.
Exactly. Because language learning isn't just about memorizing grammar rules, right? It's about how you use those rules in real life situations.
Speaking of real life, remember that part in the podcast where they talked about how important tone of voice is?
Oh yeah, tone can make or break a conversation.
Right. Like they say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
And that can be tricky for language learners because it's not always obvious,
Oh, totally. I remember when I first started learning English, I was so focused on being grammatically correct that I'd end up sounding like a robot.
What? Really?
Yeah. I was all about those super formal phrases, like instead of saying sorry, I'd say, I do apologize.
Oh no.
I know, right? And people would look at me like I was from another planet.
But hey, you were just trying to be polite.
Exactly. But it goes to show that sometimes simple is better.
Definitely. And that's where listening to native speakers comes in handy. You pick up on those nuances, the rhythm, the tone.
Right, like how they actually talk, not how the textbook says they talk.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment, even if it feels a little silly at first.
It's all about stepping outside that comfort zone, right? Now, one thing I really appreciated about that podcast was how they weren't afraid to talk about those truly cringeworthy moments.
Yeah, they really leaned into the awkwardness, which I think made their advice even more relatable.
Right. It's like they were saying, hey, we've all been there. And that brings me to another great point they made about self-deprecating humor.
Oh, it's a powerful tool.
Because it's like you're acknowledging your flaws, but you're not taking yourself too seriously.
And that can make people feel more at ease because it shows that you're, human.
Exactly. We all mess up sometimes, and it's okay to laugh about it.
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of simple phrases that pack a punch, what about, how's it going?
Such a great alternative to, how are you?
Right. It's casual, friendly, and you hear it all the time.
It's like an instant icebreaker.
So we've talked about a bunch of useful phrases, in a bit of a hurry, terrible with. But have you ever actually tried using these in real life?
It's one thing to know the words, it's another to actually use them, right?
Totally. It's like that saying, knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad.
Okay, I like that one. But you're right, the real learning happens when we put things into practice.
And you know what else? We need to be okay with making mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. Mistakes are inevitable, especially when you're learning a new language.
It's like we put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect, but even native speakers mess up sometimes.
All the time. I mean, how many times have you said, or like in a sentence, we all do it?
Oh, tell me about it. I have a whole highlight reel of my most awkward English moments.
I bet they make for good stories, though.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Story time. One time, I was at this fancy restaurant, right? And I was trying to order a glass of water. How hard can it be?
Let me guess, it backfired.
Big time.
Yeah.
I think I ended up asking for like a cup of aqua or something ridiculous like that.
Oh, no!
Yeah, it was bad. But you know what? We all had a good laugh about it afterward.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about humor. It can really save the day in those awkward moments.
Totally. It lightens the mood and makes everyone feel more comfortable.
Which is a good reminder that even though those awkward encounters can be, well, awkward, they can also be opportunities for connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I really appreciated about that podcast we discussed. They didn't shy away from the awkwardness, they embraced it. And I think that made their advice even more relatable and effective.
Totally. Because we all have those moments, right?
Every single one of us.
Exactly. So to wrap things up, I think the biggest takeaway here is to just keep practicing, keep experimenting, and don't be afraid to laugh at yourself along the way.
Well said. Because at the end of the day, communication is about connecting with others. And sometimes those imperfect moments can lead to the most genuine connections of all.